once more toward the invisible coastline. A blast from the big steam whistle high overhead shattered the silence, and as if the sound had somehow set the air moving, a very tall and pointed church tower took shape out of nothing. This was her time alone. Soon she would clamber down the worn wooden ladder, blackened from thousands of hands, to the steerage deck, and make sure the others were awake for the morning porridge. The seagulls glided out of the fog on rigid, outspread wings, looking exactly like the gulls back home. So far, nothing had happened. This was the first morning after they had left England behind. "There should be 5 cups," said Gustaf. "We brought 5. He peered at Anna from under the lock of hair falling into his face. Elisabeth and Ellen stood behind her, each of them clinging to the waistband of her apron, as she'd taught them to do when on board ship. Carl lay motionless on the mattress, but he was awake now, looking at them expectantly, waiting to see what would happen next. Again she searched the jute sack at the foot of the mattress, running one hand along the outside, the other rummaging through bundles of clothing all the way down to where Gustaf's concertina lay hidden. Nothing. She felt his gaze on her back, unwavering, and it seemed to her more and more stern, while out of the corner of her eye she saw the line growing longer at the foot of the ladder. They were going to be the very last in line. Then she noticed part of the straw mattress sticking up next to Carl's head. She turned away without meeting Gustaf's eyes and reached down. Her fingertips touched metal. "Here it is," Anna said, keeping her tone even. Gustaf nodded curtly and headed for the line of people. The girls stayed where they were, holding on to her apron. She picked up Carl in her arms and handed him his cup. He must have been the one to hide it there. He'd grown so big, it seemed almost as if he'd done nothing but grow since they'd left Göteborg. The boy took the cup, then turned to look over her shoulder, searching for his father. They all went to join him in line. Behind her stood one of the older women she recognized from the crossing to England. Mrs. Lundgren was a widow traveling with her son, a dark-haired young man named David. Anna didn't know Mrs. Lundgren's first name. She seemed a retiring sort of person. "You should tie them together," Mrs. Lundgren said now. "Ask the steward for one of those leather straps. There's already a hole for them in the handle, but they don't give out the straps because they want you to pay for them. Tie the cups together so they won't get lost again. The same goes for the bowls and spoons." Anna felt herself blushing. She didn't know how the old woman had discerned their problem, although, of course, the door to 1A, married quarters, as their section was called, had stood open. She mutely nodded her thanks and then pushed forward in line behind Gustaf, as she wondered what to say to the steward and what strap might be called in English. She felt the girl's hands holding tight to her apron and tugging in opposite directions, like a pair of weights that kept her balanced and steady on the slightly sloping deck. Breakfast, which was served out on the foredeck, consisted of porridge and bread, still quite fresh and presumably brought from shore. Weak coffee was also served with the food. In a few days there probably won't be much of either, Anna thought, trying to get the girls to drink their coffee, even though it wasn't something they were used to. Elisabeth made faces at the taste. Gustaf had sat down on a bench and was holding Carl on his lap, putting his own big cap on the boy's head. It slid down over Carl's eyes, making him laugh. Anna wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and went over to the rail. The fog had gone. The church on shore was now clear to see, and what she'd earlier taken for an unusually pointed tower was actually just the beginning of one. The slender spire was still encased in scaffolding. In front of the church's gray facade stood a row of small buildings, alternately brown and gray, and almost impossible to distinguish.